Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really cool paper that gives AI a totally new way to see the world, not just as a flat list of data, but as a rich, structured hierarchy, kind of like how we see things.
So let's kick things off with a big question. With all the incredible power they have, what's one of the biggest blind spots for even our most advanced AI models today?
Well, the answer really comes down to how they perceive information. You could call it AI's flat world problem.
And this really gets to the heart of it, right? Most AI models, even something as powerful as a transformer, tend to see data as just one long, flat line of words or pixels. But that's not how the real world works. Information has layers. It has sections, paragraphs, layouts, and all that structure carries a ton of meaning.
So, what this means is they can read the words, but they can't see the document. They're basically seeing the individual trees, but totally missing the forest. All that vital context that comes from how information is organized, it just gets lost. Okay, so how do we fix this? Well, the solution this paper puts forward is to teach AI to see the world in hierarchies, to get it out of that flat perspective.
And to even start building this idea, the researchers had to define a totally new mathematical object. They call it a nested signal. Basically, it's a formal way to represent data that has multiple layers, where signals at one level are tucked inside signals at another.
Think about a website. It's the perfect way to wrap your head around this. At the very top level, you've got the overall site structure, how the pages link together. Then, each page has its own content, like text boxes and images. And inside that content, you get down to the nitty-gritty, the individual words and pixels. That whole thing, from top to bottom, that is a nested signal.
So if you were to draw a map of that nested structure, what you'd get is something called a signal hierarchy. It's pretty much a family tree for all your data, showing how every single piece is related, from the big picture all the way down to the tiniest detail.
All right, so this is huge. The AI can now see the hierarchy. But just seeing it isn't enough, right? How does it actually use that information? Well, that meant they had to invent a whole new mechanism.
And this is where the magic happens. Introducing hierarchical self-attention, or HSA for short. You can think of it as a new kind of attention that lets an AI zoom in and out, focusing on different levels of information, from single words to entire paragraphs, all at the same time.
Now, what's really cool is that this isn't just some clever hack they came up with. The researchers actually derived HSA from a fundamental principle called entropy minimization. That sounds complicated, but think of it this way. The whole system is mathematically designed to be as efficient as possible. It's built from the ground up to find the most important patterns and just ignore the noise.
And here's why this is such a game changer in practice. Standard attention has what we call quadratic cost. That means for every new piece of data, the number of calculations explodes. It has to compare every single thing to every other single thing. But hierarchical attention, so much smarter. It groups related things together based on that hierarchy, which just slashes the number of calculations needed.
And here's the kicker. This efficiency doesn't really sacrifice performance. In fact, the paper proves that HSA is the best possible approximation of standard attention that still plays by the rules of the data's hierarchy. You get all the benefits of understanding the structure without losing the raw power that makes attention so special in the first place.
Okay, so we have this really elegant, super efficient new mechanism. But what does it actually do in the real world? Well, the results point to two massive breakthroughs. You can make AI both smarter and faster. So on one hand, you can train brand new models from scratch that are just flat out more accurate because they get the data structure. And on the other hand, and this is wild, you can upgrade existing, pre-trained models to make them unbelievably more efficient.
So let's talk about that smarter models claim first. They tested this on a classic task, analyzing movie reviews. The standard model, with its flat view of the world, got about 76% accuracy. Not bad. But the HSA model, the one that could see the structure of paragraphs and sentences, it jumped all the way up to over 81%. That is a huge leap, and it's purely from understanding the document structure.
But look, training models from scratch is super expensive and time-consuming. This is where we get to what might be the most mind-blowing result in the whole paper. What HSA can do for the models we already have and use every single day.
Yeah, this right here is the absolute game changer. You can take a massive pre-trained model like Roberta, literally just swap out its standard attention mechanism for these new HSA layers, and it just works instantly. No retraining, no fine-tuning. They call it a zero-shot upgrade, and it's exactly what it sounds like. And the effect on computational cost is just staggering. We're looking at the number of floating point operations, or flops, which is basically how much work the computer has to do. The original Roberta model chews through almost 215 million flops. The version upgraded with HSA, it needs just over 4 million. It's not even close.
Let that sink in for a second. That is a nearly 50 times reduction in the amount of raw computation. And they get this incredible efficiency boost with what the paper says is only a tiny, minimal drop in accuracy. It's just wild.
Okay, let's pull back for a second and look at the bigger picture here. Because this is way more than just a clever trick to make things faster.
So, at the end of the day, the big takeaway is this. By teaching AI to see these nested, hierarchical structures, we're unlocking a much more sophisticated and efficient way for it to process the world. This gives us smarter models when we build them from scratch, and it gives us these ridiculously huge efficiency gains for the models we already have. It's a genuine step towards an AI that understands context more like we do.
This research really gives AI an amazing blueprint for understanding the structure that we give it. But it leaves us with one last, really fascinating question to think about. What happens next? Will the next big breakthrough be an AI that can figure out these complex hierarchies all on its own?